Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Allies Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. In this episode, something slightly different as we talk to Caius Pawson, founder of the music label Young, which brought you acts like the XX and Sampha, but also is co-creator of Murmur, which is an interesting new initiative, which you came across first, Stuart.
I did, yeah. It's one of these initiatives in the realm of the climate emergency and what the music industry can do about it. And yeah, it was announced earlier this year, and it's one of the most sort of interesting ones out there.
So we spoke to Caius about that and the label and the current state of the music industry. Hi Caius, welcome to The Price of Music. We have lots of things to talk about, and if we can, I've got one or two questions about your record label, but first, do you want to tell us a little bit about Murmur, what it is, what prompted it, what's the thinking, where does it come from?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Murmur was set up by a few of us who work across music and the visual arts. I'd worked in the climate space for several years, particularly for a charity called Climate Earth. And whilst fundraising for them, the more people I met, be it activists, scientists, environmental lawyers, said the thing we really need is advocacy. And the more I looked into the classic bits of social change of our time, be it civil rights, LGBTQ plus rights, awareness around HIV and AIDS, I saw the massive power of music. And I felt that whilst there were a set of quite phenomenal organisations, business needed one set up by businesses to help businesses within the visual arts and music change, with a greater aim of supporting artists in doing something about the climate crisis.
And I guess it feels like there's just been growing talk in the industry about the problem, but I feel like you say, growing kind of awareness of, well, here's what you can actually do. You don't have to sit there and feel daunted, but you can do this, you can do that. These are the measures you can take. Is that kind of the objective, really, to kind of help people take steps rather than just worry, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have a positive outlook on these things if you're trying to enable change. We want to create an environment in which artists can talk about this. If artists can normalise talking about the planet in a positive sense and about the change they'd like to see, then all the money, all the technology exists to solve the problem. And the best way for artists to talk about this is for the industry around them to be acting upon it and to be creating an environment in which they can talk about it.
Has that been something that's difficult? I feel like whenever I've reported on an artist talking about the climate emergency, there's often been a backlash straight away. People are going, well, you get on planes, you do this, you do that. It feels like artists have put their head above the parapet before, and then they've had rocks thrown at them. But is that something that's changing, or that's something that can change if you have this structure around them, do you think?
That's certainly something that can change. I don't think we need climate saints. I think we just need normal human beings talking about how this affects them in a very personal way. A music festival is cancelled because of unseasonable flash floodings. A fan dies at a concert in Brazil because of overheating, because of unseasonable heat and lack of access to water. These are things that deeply affect artists on a very personal level and fans. And I think there are ways of helping artists find their natural story and then them amplifying that, discussing it with their audiences. But I don't think it's possible without the music industry sorting out the damage that we're doing as is, and probably most importantly, self-educating. So the world isn't going to be saved by the record industry greening vinyl. But by the act of us attempting to do that and learning about our own damage, we educate the entire industry, we educate artists, and artists are in a much better position to be a power for good on what is probably the most important conversation of our times.
I mean, tell us about the kind of the group you've put together. I know you said it came from music and also the sort of visual side, but so it's independent labels mainly, or who have you kind of brought in from the beginning, and how are you kind of structuring it?
Yeah, so at the moment, I represent music, and on the art side, it's Matthew Slotover and Victoria Siddle from Freeze Art Fairs. Beggars Group have signed up, Secretly Group have signed up, because K7, Ninja Tune, and several other indies. And what they do to be a member, so there's lots of organizations that you can sign a petition or just put your name. To join Murmur, you have to be scientifically measuring your damage. You have to have a scientifically approved plan to reduce the damage according to UN targets. And then you have to be paying what we recommend is £50 per tonne of carbon. So it's not a cheap exercise. And the reason for this is that we want to put this subject front and center of the organizing groups of these companies. It can't just come out of the charity tin at the end of the year. It's got to be discussed at the board level. It's got to be discussed by the CFO and the CEO and the COO or whatever the setup is. And I've been phenomenally, the reaction to it from business has been huge. The amount that they're pledging and how seriously they're taking it, and especially by indies, especially by people that have founder owners or strong committees. These are people who seriously believe in the subject and are acting upon it. And then on the art side, we've had several massive art galleries and art fairs sign up.
Mm. I mean, I don't want to ask this question. I'm going to word it carefully because I don't want to make it as like an indies versus majors thing. But I feel like in the UK or in Europe, actually, a lot of the momentum and a lot of the talk so far and the action so far, it has come from the indie community. Like I remember, I think it was Ninja Tunes Peter Quick as the first person I saw talk about this at a conference. I know Beggars and Secretly, and they've all been like publishing their kind of their strategies, talking about it, involved in these movements. Is that down to them, like you said, being kind of founder owners, or is there something in the indie community that's kind of made this a priority, I guess?
I would say the majors are actually doing much better than they're being given credit for. The upside that the indies
Yeah.
have is that they've got either very well placed committees, or there's founder owners, or they're more agile and can move quickly, or they don't have to report to shareholders or massive corporate structures. The things that the majors have is like whole departments on sustainability and ESG experts and people who have like been in sustainability their whole life and really care about it. Um, they have their own set, Sony Corp, for instance, is very, very progressive on green issues. And the CEO
Mm.
has made it Sony's mission to create good in the world from creativity, with green, as they would call it, being a massive part of it. But the indies have this upside of being able to move very quickly. Someone like Peter Quick is a phenomenal example. Um, he chairs NDE. He runs Ninja Tune. And then on these subjects, he can just make a decision and it happens. And he's probably one of the best educated people on this subject. And he runs Ninja Tune. That's a rare
Mm.
combination. But the beautiful thing I've seen is that like each company's set up differently and each company does it very well in a different way. So secretly it's Ben Swanson and Chloe Van Bragen. Ben Swanson is one of the co-founders of Secret Canadian. I think he's the COO of Secret Group. Him and Chloe, who runs operations in the UK, they have a committee, and that committee is phenomenally well plugged in, both to the issues of sustainability, but then how that affects like the vinyl production line and the supply chain. So I've enjoyed like very different ways of approaching it, but I've been very infused and impressed by people's response to it.
What are the practical ways then that we can improve the situation? What can record labels be doing, and what sort of developments and research needs to happen in the future? And on top of that, how much does it cost? And do you find people are balking at that cost or embracing it?
There's a massive amount of um, research being done, and I think that data is vital. I mean, to give you an idea, 88% of Beggars' emissions come from physical product.
Right.
Business travel and heating is tiny compared to that, and energy sources. So I'd say about 75% of that 88% is from manufacturing, and the rest from distribution. That is all a joint supply chain. The music industry has to work together to do that. We need better data on, there's a lot of solutions out there, but we need better data on how effective those solutions are at reducing the damage of vinyl. So there's a lot of injection molding initiatives, some of which claim up to a 90% reduction. There are initiatives to do vinyl creation on demand, which would, wastage is huge within vinyl. And there's a few initiatives to reshape the charts to maybe encourage less variance. All of those will take industry collaboration, good data on what will actually help, and then creating a environment in which innovation is encouraged across the entirety of the industry. And really, that's just people talking. The majors have set up MICC in America, and they've put someone from A2IM, the American AIM, on that to chat. There's the Music Climate Pact set up by AIM and the BPI, sponsored by Murmur. And there's several of these things who are sort of working together, including Murmur, to get collaboration across the supply chain. And we just need to be working in lockstep with the manufacturers and the distributors to sort of help reduce this thing as a whole. Cost, there will always be cost involved with innovation. But how long is a piece of string with how much does a vinyl cost? And do you want 180 grams? Do you want 140 grams? Do you want 5 pieces of vinyl? Do you want 1 piece of vinyl? Do you want this wrap? Do you want this gatefold? Cost has always been variable. And I think if we care about creating products which, I mean, vinyl's currently made out of PVC. That's just about the most damaging form of plastic there is. Luckily, the vast majority of it goes straight on a shelf and not into the sea. But the cost isn't prohibitive. And as we sort of grow the amount that is being made this way, the cost will drop.
Did you see, have you come across the band Dog Unit? Because Dog Unit released their record on vinyl, but they also released their record without the vinyl. They released the sleeve, and you bought obviously the download, but you didn't have to. But they didn't have to manufacture the record. Do you see what I mean? But you still got the artwork, the lovely artwork that you can put on a shelf, which looks great. But you didn't. But there was nothing that you didn't have to actually have the record inside if you just wanted to listen to it, download it, and listen to it, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, but I suppose we need all of this sort of innovation and trying things in new ways.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned, I think earlier on, you talked about the commitments for joining Murmur. Is that one of the important parts of this? That it's not just a press release saying we want to be nice, but it is there are commitments they have to sort of they'll be held to, and like you said, there are costs. It's not about just kind of saying you're good. It's about doing the work. Is that an important part of how you see this working and how you see it kind of having an impact?
Yeah, that's massively important. I think when there's a fair price associated with something, it's taken more seriously. And if you just siphon off sustainability or care for the planet into a very small corner of a business or an industry, it will stay there on the priority rankings. If you can make it a major cost, and £50 per tonne was set well above offsetting, which is offsetting cost, which is a whole different discussion, but well below what some of the think tanks on the environment think that the cost of damages per ton of carbon to the planet, the social cost. And so we wanted to make it affordable enough that businesses could actually do it without putting them out of business, but ambitious enough that it could do good. And then the money is spent in three ways. It's three different expert committees that are separate from the industry, so they have their own autonomy. One is called Change Our World, which pays through to climate organizations and a series of experienced climate managers, climate grant managers, pick where that goes. Change Our Industry is about rewarding innovation and things that can help supply side. So on a sort of pan-industry level, and that is picked by industry experts. So people at different labels, and there's people from the majors, people from the indies, people from all over, alongside sustainability experts. And the final one is Change Our Conversation, where we're funding artists' initiatives to talk about this. With this, and that's the really big thing. Like, how do we create an atmosphere, an environment in which all artists feel like they can talk about this? We don't need all artists to be activists. Unsurprisingly, the vast majority of artists just want to be artists. But if you say love is love or end systemic racism, you're not an activist, you're a human being or an artist. And at the moment, if you say, can we not burn this planet to smithereens? You're hounded out of town and you're considered an activist. And so that's probably the most complicated one, but the one with the most effect.
And I know you're obviously just getting started, and I guess that the launch of Murmur is going to stimulate people to do stuff. But have you been excited by what you've seen out there, the kind of projects that are looking for grants or that could be awarded? Like, is there a lot of stuff going on below the surface that we're going to see coming out the next year across all those three categories?
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned before, I strongly believe that all the solutions that we need exist. And we just need massive political change. And political change, as they say, culture is upstream of politics. So we're already funding some phenomenal things on the climate side. On the industry side, there's huge initiatives around how to drop the impact on vinyl and distribution. And then, there's lots of initiatives from No Music on a Dead Planet to Sounds Right with Earth%, which are helping artists to talk about this issue.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that because we talked about it recently, didn't we, Steve? When I came back from the BPI's conference and I saw Faye Milton talk from Music Declares. And I came out of the room just going, wow, I saw this positive speech about how we can do this, how we've got the stuff we need. When some of the stuff in the news at the time was about people saying, oh, God, can we do net zero? Let's rein in green targets. Maybe Labour shouldn't do green stuff because it will lose the election. I felt this real sense when I saw someone talking about, actually, we can do this. It is hard. It can be daunting. But that feels like something that is coming from the music industry at the moment, this idea of let's get on with it. Let's not lose ourselves in kind of this can't be done, I suppose. That feels like part of music's power.
The major issue right now is it's about 85% of people across the sort of Europe and the US want massive change on climate change now. But all of them feel like they're in a minority. And that's because of quite a strategic doom narrative in the media that is separating us. As I mentioned, we're not looking for every artist to be like Greta. We're just looking for artists to talk about things in a very personal way. When someone says, I'm concerned because the farm I grew up next to is being washed out by floods or not returning as much grain, or I'm concerned because the river I used to swim in as a kid is now too polluted to swim in, or I'm concerned because members of the Oxford team in the boat race got E. coli from a polluted Thames. These are just normal things for humans to bring up. But the media landscape at the moment is 100% set against people saying things which to nearly all of us just seem completely natural. And this is where artists can lead. I mean, there's a classic stat that in 1988, 11.3% of Americans were against the idea of homosexual marriage. That's the phrase used in the poll. By 2018, around 75% were for it. And when you look at the social and political science behind that, that's pop stars. That's people's personal lives being normalized in TV, in film, in media, on pop tours, in music videos. It's not a wishy-washy thing to say that like music and culture and art has a huge potential to drive change. You just have to look at the AIDS crisis. It wasn't just early adopters like Nan Goldin, Leonard Bernstein who drove it. Elton John and Freddie Mercury and Annie Lennox and hundreds of massive pop stars were talking about it before governments were even recognizing the issue. We have a huge opportunity here for artists just to tell a very organic, natural story. And if you are an artist with an activist heart, go out and do that. And if you're an artist with a different heart, just do it your way. But as an industry, the onus is on us to support our artists in doing this. Because this is not a simple or binary subject. It's nuanced. There's charges of hypocrisy. There's all these things. But like we were born into carbon-intensive worlds. You can't go to work. You can't go to school. You can't meet your parents for a meal without burning carbon. That's the way it's been set up. And so this idea of hypocrisy is we need to get past it. We need to help artists get past it, to ask for the simple changes that we need to make. And going back to what you said, like there is a lot of hope. Like change is happening far quicker than it's being given credit for. We just need, as an industry, to allow artists to make that change happen even quicker.
How much has this affected the way you work as a label? Because obviously you have your own label, Young Records. How much has what you do been necessary to change over the course of however long, last few years?
It's an interesting question because when I first got into this and I was suffering from sort of climate anxiety and the doom mongers had won, I thought, well, music can't do anything about this. So I better go work somewhere else to work on this. So I went to work for an environmental law charity. And I did fundraising and all sorts of things like that. And so I kept the two parts of my life very divided. And, you know, who I am is this record label. You know, I had to sort of leave that to go and do what I think would be good. So it's only in recent years that I've figured out the power that we have as a label. But really, we exist to support what our artists' dreams are. And if you depart from that by 1 degree, you're doing a disservice and you don't deserve your position supporting an artist. So it's really been about making artists feel confident in doing it themselves. And luckily for us, more and more artists are interested in it. You know, Romy from the XX is always pushing me on touring because, you know, we're a management company too. Robin, who we manage, is a massive believer in this. And nearly all of, you know, Sampha, who's on the label we manage, you know, he sat down with me the other day and he's like, all right, let's talk about this. And so it's becoming more and more of a thing artists are interested in, and therefore the label can have more and more of a part to play. But yeah, you know, we've got to deal with our own damage. We've got to self-educate if we want to be advocates, and then we've got to support our artists in doing the really important work.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's like the Rolling Stone? The more people talk about it, and the more it's in the public eye, the more will then happen. If we have, because you're looking almost for role models, aren't you? Whether the role model is a label or the role model is an artist, people who are making, who are having a success breaking down, boundaries, I think.
That's 100% it. Every movement starts with an activist or a leader, um, you know, and then it ends up with ubiquity, and that's when real change happens. You can't go to a show now, a pop show, without a pride flag being waved, and that's a beautiful thing. But if we go back to Joe Meek's era, that wasn't the case. And we've had phenomenal people driving this, from um, Billie Eilish to Faye and Savages and MDE, through to Chris Martin and Ellie Goulding and Massive Attack and Tom York and Radiohead 20 years ago. Like, I got my break as a 14-year-old touting Radiohead tickets. And they've been backing Greenpeace from like before anyone even talked about it. So yeah, I mean, we need to head to a point where it's complete ubiquity, and it's beneficial for artists to be talking about it rather than a risk, and so all can talk about it because all are affected by it. Everyone's affected by it in their own way.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned several times that you've talked about the past campaigns, past battles in terms of LGBTQ plus whites and other. Is that something that does give people things to learn from? Like, this is how change happened in the past. This is artist, but it sounds like there's I suppose human rights campaigns outside the climate that have worked, and that's encouragement. It's not just looking into this particular this element of justice, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think there's a very rich history of musicians and artists affecting great change on social issues. I'm not saying that we could do a peace concert in a place that's war torn and war will stop. I don't think it would harm it, but on social issues where it's about getting people to change their minds and it's about getting people to understand social situations, it's massively impactful. And this is just it. People have to understand that change can happen, and it will only happen if it's happening on a cultural level first. That's what will create political change. And that's the part that musicians and music fans and the industries around them can be a part of. And we face a bit of a crisis in the music industry right now. I think the music industry, from a business point of view, is better than it's ever been. The fact that there's no barriers to entry to getting your music to anybody in the world. Physical is soaring through vinyl. Streaming is a whole new paradigm. There's many different ways you can get your music out there. The crisis for me right now is we live in a world of infinite media and therefore completely muffled narrative. I don't know how many trillion bits of media are created a day between social media and the orthodox media and everything else, but the ability to tell a story through that, be it at the music level, the film level, the cultural level, the political level, is getting more and more difficult. And that's why we're seeing less and less artists breaking. And it was always the case that you could have as many hits as you wanted, but unless you stood for something, and that standing for something could be music in a unique way, or it could be a political issue, you would disappear with the grains of time.
Is that the common thread which runs through the label then over all these years, that there is something that the artist that you sign, you look for an artist which has something, I guess, almost unique about them, but something, as you say, they stand for, whether it's the XX or it's Sampha, but they have something to say, or something that they believe in very passionately, or they have a sound which is very identifiable.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've always been connected to is uniqueness of spirit. Like, is someone able to connect into who they are in a unique way that you can tell it's them? And I've been connected to that beyond the label. I sort of I'm always attracted to people who know who they are and are making decisions based completely off that. Um, if you are reacting to the way things are, you will end up sounding or acting like everybody else. And if you have an intuitive ability to like respond to who you are and act upon that, you will make unique music. And even if all the sounds have been done, if you are able to channel who you are in a unique way, then you're lighting me up. And that's why I've been drawn. Not genre, not scene. I'm a huge fan of scenes, and artists come out of scenes, and I'm a huge fan of genres. And all the labels that I love did have a moment and a scene and a sound. But I just found that as soon as I got to running a label, I was drawn to individuals who were doing things their own way. Now, not every human being is going to stand up and, you know, how you represent yourself politically, it could be very different, you know? Like some people will stand up and shout about it, and some people will lead by action. And so I think you can stand for something, even if it's just standing for yourself, or you can stand for a bigger subject. But if you look at someone like Taylor Swift, she was top 5 artists in the world 5 years ago. And then she stood up against the patriarchy, and she stood up against big business, and she stood up for herself. And now she's the biggest thing on planet Earth. And I think we've hit a time now where, like, if you want to be bigger than a viral hit or the virality that your track gets, you've got to stand for something. You've either got to be a completely unique human being, or you've got to be saying something and doing something of importance. And so I think the thing that we need to overcome as an industry is like, how do we tell unique stories? And this links perfectly to what we need to be doing as an industry to do our part to fight off this crisis. And that to me is very exciting.
And how traumatic is it, or has it been for you, when you realise running a label and you find someone who is that's everything that you want, and you realise they may not sell a single record? Because there is always a struggle, I think, between the heart and the head when it comes to being a position like yours, because you find someone really good and you'd like to put them in front of people, and you really want heart and soul for them to find an audience. But at the same time, that all comes with a cost, doesn't it? One which certain artists are never going to recoup.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think sometimes the issue is it's how we judge success is extremely narrow. Um, 3 of the first acts I signed were Kid Harpoon, El Guincho, and Jack Piñate. Um, and Kid Harpoon especially, I lost Beggars' record amount of money on a project ever. I was 18. Um, he was an artist I loved. He was a good mate, and we made some not great albums together. Not bad, but not great. But he was so talented. He's now gone on to be the biggest songwriter and producer in the world. We just had it in the wrong lane. He wasn't doing the thing he was meant to be doing. El Guincho made 2 beautiful records, but he found the process heartbreaking. Touring, the putting his soul out there, having to tell a story. He then produced the first 2 Rosalia albums, and he's now making phenomenal music and has like found himself. And Jack Piñate had a bit more success sales-wise, but he's now a songwriter for Salt. And the camaraderie of being around others and not having to put yourself out there. Music's a massive thing. There's no correlation between sales and success. But very few people are like really cut out to be artists. You might be cut out to be a musician. You might be cut out to be a collaborator. You might be cut out to be a producer or an engineer or something else. And when it doesn't work, it's the most painful thing in the world. Because it's someone's, not just who they are, it's their sort of sum total of their expression. And And it's as much about, the reason this is such a beautiful place to work is we don't control it, you know? It's like something clicks in the human condition and responds to something or doesn't. If it was anything to do with the work that I do, every record I put out would be as big as the biggest record I've ever worked on. And I'm still putting out records that sell 12 copies and putting my entire life into it. And that can be devastating. But I think if you're being true to the artist and what they're about, then you can always find success in it, even if the sales flop.
That feels more spiritually rewarding than if you were like the person who's like, I'm going to sign a sea shanty guy off TikTok because I think that will sell loads, and then that sells nothing. I think that must be more crushing for the human soul, maybe, than doing something you've loved.
Imagine the algorithm of you make a bit of music. Like, no one's out there trying to make bad music. Everyone's out there making music they believe in. We might not think from the outside that maybe this person should be making music as the thing they're doing with their life, but they're believing in it. And then an algorithm just rewards you and gives you 3 billion streams. And then your next track has 60,000. That's soul crushing. And the whole system set up around that isn't set up to look after the human being. It's to monetize the product. The thing I've always loved about the music industry is at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about artists. Bruce Springsteen is bigger than any Bruce Springsteen album. Beyonce is bigger than any Beyonce album. In other industry, it's the artifact, and everything is about selling that product. Still at the heart of what we do, it's about artist development. Doesn't matter if you're a major, or if you are a rights company, or if you're an indie, or if you're a distributor, you want artists. And so, I can imagine if it's just about the single and it's just about the virality, it becomes about the product, and it's very dehumanizing. Anyway, you've got me on you've touched a raw nerve.
If we can look ahead, I know this is one of those impossible questions. Do you have any idea what the music industry will look like in 3-5 years' time, or what you would like it to look like at all, particularly when it comes to with reference to what you're doing with Murmur?
I tell you what I'd like it to look like. So I'm a terrible futurist. I mean, I was like, why would you need an iPhone? I was like, I've got a CD, why would I need an iPod? I've got a CD player. Streaming, I've got a great iTunes collection. So I'm useless at like knowing what it would look like, but what I would like it to look like. I would like the music industry to be a place that supports cultural ecosystems so artists grow. When I hear, artists don't come out of nowhere. They come out of scenes, and they come out of places which are culturally enriching. I think Spotify has and streaming have done a phenomenal job of monetizing the music industry. As we said earlier, it's easier than ever to make money if you currently have a brand. It's more difficult than ever to break through. And we need the people who are being rewarded by the industry need to understand that responsibility and be investing in how the future generations of people are going to engage in music, make it, promote it, write about it, talk about it, all the bits that what you've done, Steve, what you've done, Stuart, those are vital parts of the music ecosystem. What I've done, what a blog has done, what a venue's done, we need to be rewarding that, and we need to make it as easy as possible for artists to feel like they can innovate in a real way. So that's what I'd like to see from the music industry. That's what, from a Murmur point of view, I'd like to see the entirety of the music industry. We're starting with records because I own a record label, but I'm also involved in live through management. I would like to see all parts of the music industry taking responsibility for the damage we're doing as a way of self-educating and then giving artists a license to talk about it so that we can go back to playing a massively positive part in society. That's where I'm at with it. And I would like artists to feel like they can make music that represents themselves, because that's the sort of world I want to live in, and that's the sort of music I want to listen to.
I think that's a brilliant place probably to wrap it up. Thank you so much for talking to us, Caius, for taking some time out of what I imagine is a very busy day. Although there probably is no typical day in the life of someone who runs a record label and is involved in all the other things that you do, management and everything else. I don't suppose it's not your average 9 to 5 with a lunch break, is it?
No, that's the joy of it. I mean, Jamie XX starts a 10-day club residency in Bermondsey at MIT in a couple of days, and I'm just thinking about how my in bed early, up early routine is about to be turned on its head. Yeah, I mean, the joys of part of the joy of this is a complete lack of regularity.
Well, listen, pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. We wish you all the best with the label and Murmur in the future. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Caius Pawson from Young Records and Murmur, and I mean, there was a lot of interesting points being made, although I have to thank Caius for reminding us of Kid Harpoon and the fact that I once introduced Kid Harpoon at a showcase, a label showcase gig. Now that man is writing and producing for Miley Cyrus and Harry Styles. Well done, Harps.
It all started there. You were the springboard for that success.
But I mean, yeah, there was a lot of interesting stuff, and the way we're going to approach what will the music industry look like as it becomes greener. But there's so much that can be done. It's just the way of going about it, as Caius was saying, I think.
I think that's it. And he mentioned that term climate anxiety. And I've certainly been feeling that when you read about the kind of the terrible headlines and people sort of saying, oh, what we're going to do is not possible. And I think from the music industry right now, it feels like there's a bunch of initiatives where they're saying we can do this and we can do all kinds of changes and it's possible. So yeah, that's the thing I took away from that is that it's can do really, isn't it? It's we can do this and it might be hard, it might cost money, but it's too important not to. So yeah.
You can let us know your own thoughts, of course, at the usual address, which is thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you've liked what you've heard, do tell your friends or colleagues or give us a rating and review online. And if you have any questions which you'd like us to tackle on the show, again, email us at the usual Price of Music email address. Till next time, thanks a lot, everyone. Cheerio.